Good morning and happy Friday or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whenever you're listening to this. I am so excited to have you all back for another episode of If I Don't Tell You, Who Will? My weekly LinkedIn Live podcast event. My name is Nicole Flowers. I am a career strategist and resume writer. And today I am joined by a dear friend, Alexandra. She is the senior director of editorial at Doximity, where she has been in editorial for 10 years. And for those who don't know, Doximity is, how have you explained it to me?
Yeah, so it's the largest verified network of healthcare professionals in the US. We support a medical news feed and medical newsletters to make sure that physicians and other clinicians are getting the most up to date information for their specialties each week. And that's what my team works on.
Alexandra went to Brown University for undergrad, was thinking of going into the medical field herself, but was like, nah, I'm just going to go get my MPH at Johns Hopkins. No big deal. Anyway, it's so lovely having you here, Alexandra. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for imparting your wisdom. The reason I'm really excited about having Alexandra is I bring up many of our conversations a lot of time in my coaching calls. So I'm very excited to talk about cover letters. That will be towards the end because she has some really great insight from the hiring side of the table on cover letters, but also just that there's still humanity in hiring. So that's a big thing. Let's jump in. As we all know, I ask a few questions on every call. And so we're going to jump into those. First things first, Alexandra. What's something candidates think matters, but actually doesn't?
First, thanks for the intro and thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here. But to answer your question, I think something that candidates overvalue often is checking every single box. So, looking at a job description and trying to align every single bullet point from that job or something from that experience and making sure that every single box is checked on your end, whether that's through your resume or your cover letter that you share or even in an interview, and feeling like you need to sound perfect and feeling like you need this air of prestige around the entire thing. I think it's more important to focus on the things that directly link to the job that you do have instead of checking every single box that the job might say is a nice to have or we'd like to see.
Yes, and that plagues women, as we know, statistically more than men. Men, I think, what is it, will apply to a job if they're 60% aligned, but women have to have 80% plus. I talk to women all the time in my practice, and so it's always, do you think that this is transferable? I don't have this thing, so I was thinking that maybe I don't want to waste their time, especially in the age of AI when people can apply to any role. It's okay if you are mostly aligned with the role and then showcase the other skills that you might not have, but help you think differently about the work, because that's also something that's really exciting, I think, for hiring managers is how do you think differently and outside the box, and how do different skills that you do have communicate well in the position. So on the same end, what do you think that a lot of people don't think matters, but absolutely does?
I wouldn't say that candidates don't think these things matter, but I think at times they might be undervalued. So I'm going to just share them anyway. Four things specifically, I would say clarity, specificity, judgment, and communication. How you communicate is really important. It's not just whether you're polished, but whether you can be clear and concise and thoughtful. I think in many roles, especially in ones that involve leadership or cross functional roles, your communication is part of the work. It's both written and how you might communicate in interactions with the team if you're farther along in the process are things that people are going to be looking at. I think some candidates might underestimate how much hiring managers are assessing judgment in every interaction. So that's how you answer questions, how you talk about your past teams, how you talk about challenges with past teams, how you follow up, and how you handle ambiguity, whether that's through a direct assignment that they've given you or just through the questions that are being asked of you in an interview setting. Those are things that I think are all sometimes forgotten, but really important.
I always say everything communicates. And I think you just reiterate it so well here, which is how you present yourself, not just in your cover letter and how you write and how you think about it, but to your point, the judgment of speaking well about former colleagues, the place you worked, even if it was a tough place to work. And I think another thing is that when we ramble over and over or we go off, people think, how can this person synthesize a lot of information so that cross-functionally they can communicate it well, or to leadership they can communicate it well. So having a clear resume that gets straight to the point, having a cover letter that doesn't reiterate exactly what was in the resume, or having well-structured practice answers. Not that they need to be rote, but anyway, everything communicates. And I love that you just backed me up on that without even knowing. Now, I also bring Alexandra up a lot in my calls because we were out and she was telling me how she had a role open and 1,000 people applied for it. Maybe 1,300, you said. When we talk about humanity in HR and hiring, this is an example right here. She wanted to go through all of the roles, and after a while, you started looking for keywords.
Yes.
So tell me more about that really quickly. Like when someone says keywords, what does that look like?
Often when I'm hiring, just for some background, I am hiring medical content strategists. So I'm looking for someone who might have a background in content strategy, in email marketing, in creating content for physicians, in writing content for physicians, whether that's videos or something more clinical, or someone with a clinical background. And so it depends on the opening at the time. But I often will search for whatever I think is the most important thing I've outlined in that job description. Right now, our company has moved heavily into AI supporting workflows, and we've built some AI tools. And so having some sort of AI fluency has become important, whether we want it to be or not, but it's become important. And so
Yes.
perhaps that's what I'm looking for. I'm seeing, do you have any experience with this tool? Do you know what Claude is? Have you used Claude Code? Stuff like that. In a case where I'm looking for someone with a clinical background, I might search for your degree. I might say, do we have any MDs, DOs, and PSPAs, pharmacists in this batch? Because that might be a priority. It is in this role that I'm hiring for right now. We want someone with a clinical background because they're going to be reviewing clinical cases that need to be clinically accurate, which is really important for clinician trust on our network. So there's different ways you can do it. But to Nicole's point, I really think putting humanity into the process is important because I don't want to be the person who doesn't reply to candidates who are applying. I want people to feel like I've really read what they submitted because I know people are taking time to do this and do it thoughtfully. But yes, keywords is one way that I can start sifting through when I have a really big pile of resumes to look at.
Way to humanize the whole experience, Alexander, because sometimes we think, I was knocked out immediately, or I didn't get to talk to someone. Sometimes there are legitimate and literal knockout questions. So if you need someone with a certain degree, I remember when I was hiring at Meta, everyone who was going to apply for my team had to have a certain level of experience in a very specific area. And if you didn't, it was unfortunately pointless. I'd love just to hear what keywords can look like. So that's why it's really important on LinkedIn and in your resume to have some places where you have things that link to the job description, but also to the work itself. Okay, so someone's applied. You're gonna look at the resume. What is an immediate yes signal when you see a candidate?
So I would say to your point about making things clear, clear ownership, clear impact, and being thoughtfully self aware, an immediate yes would be seeing someone who can clearly explain the impact they've had and the decisions they made along the way. So, not just, I know Claude Code, but here's how I've used Claude Code. They don't just say, I worked on this project, but they can say, here's the problem, here's what I did, here's what changed because of that. And I think that kind of tying those three pieces together tells me that you've thought through how your skills would apply here, and they don't make you do the work to try to figure out why this matters. You've thought about why it matters, and you've already identified your value in this role so that I don't have to. When I'm looking at potentially 1,000 other applications, that would stand out to me.
Uh, it gives me chills to think about just beautifully articulated resumes. I know it's my thing and all, but it's the idea of it. Because to your point, make it easy. You have 1,000 people. You're doing your best to get through each person because you value the time that they put in. And one of the things they also often say is, don't make it hard to get to know you. Scream from the mountaintops the impact that you've made. Tell people very clearly And like you said, make it easy for you as a hiring manager to consume that to say, okay, let's bring them in for a conversation. I want to learn more about this. That sounds really interesting. On the converse, what's an immediate no for you, even if someone looks good on paper?
I would say vague answers. This is more maybe at the phone screen stage or something like that, but blame, lack of reflection, lack of self awareness, and unclear contribution. Definitely blame. And I think something that's standing out that goes back to something we were talking about a couple of minutes ago is just people who don't speak well of challenging experiences that they've had. We all have them. And there's a way to be gracious and there's a way to not let me know that you had tension with your colleagues because I'm going to assume that you might be bringing tension onto my team. And I'm really proud of the team I've built. And I'm really proud of the fact that we are happy and work well together. And there's nothing I'd rather do less than bring someone on who disrupts that balance because they don't have self awareness or they're not able to communicate with people in a respectful way. That's a huge no for me.
Exactly. It takes a long time for a good leader to cultivate a really good team, to see in interviews, to say, we have this strength, but this one's missing. Let's add this. Because a good leader knows the strengths of their team. And a good leader will also pay attention to see if you will be someone who comes in and like water under a rock creates some sort of infestation. I don't even know where that came from. But anyway, it's disgusting. But it's true.
Leave the drama behind.
Leave the drama. And I tell them, you can tell me, your coach, you can tell your mom, you can tell your best friend. You are not going to tell your interviewer about all this. Talk about over mimosas on Sunday brunch. No one else wants to hear it. So we're nearing time here. And I know we're going to talk about cover letters a little bit, but if someone had 30 days to seriously improve their chances for a role, what would you tell them to focus on?
I would tell them to focus on sharpening their story, tightening their resume bullets, targeting roles really intentionally, and being selective. I think when you're unemployed or maybe you're employed but unhappy in your job, it can be really tempting to see what sticks to the wall and just apply to a bunch of things. Depending on who the hiring manager is, I think that can be sensed a bit. It also takes energy from where you could really be spending your time focusing on the roles that you really want by narrowing in and being selective and just spending your time and focus on those roles that really speak to you and really connect to your experience or ones that you really want that maybe there's a gap in your experience, but it's your dream or something like that. So yeah, I think sharpening your story and being intentional are two of the biggest takeaways. Another takeaway I would say is just ultimately connecting the dots for the hiring manager, and a cover letter can be a really good place to do that, especially when one is asked of you.
At Meta, we were like, do not send them. We will not read them. So I didn't know. Alexandra informed me that you can actually add it to the back end of the application.
Right.
You ask for a cover letter every time.
So my company hires different teams across the board that have different needs. I would assume an engineer or a data scientist doesn't necessarily need to write a cover letter. But on my team, which is editorial, where there is writing involved, there is synthesis of information involved, I want to see how you can communicate with writing. And I want to understand how your syntax works. And if you're just using AI, I'm using it as a way to get to know you and to connect the dots as well that might not be visible or obvious from your resume. People love to say that cover letters don't matter. My take is that if the employer or the hiring manager asks for one, it matters. I wouldn't personally add it to the back end of my package for interviewing because
Mhm.
it is another step that someone has to look at. So if I didn't want it, I certainly wouldn't ask for one, but I think there's value specifically in the role that I'm hiring for,
Mhm.
but there's value there. So if it's there, you should write one. And when there are 1,000 applicants or even less, small signals matter. So did you follow the directions? Did you tailor your materials? Did you use the opportunity to make your case? I think those things can absolutely influence whether someone takes a closer look. when I'm hiring and we ask for a cover letter, I notice whether someone follows the instruction. If someone uploads their resume twice instead of a cover letter, that tells me something. I had someone upload a diploma instead of their cover letter the other day, which just it was an immediate no for me because to me, you're not following directions, you're trying to take a shortcut, and then it also makes it unfair for the people who actually did follow the direction. I've almost wasted time looking at this other person who didn't do what was asked of them. I think it's actually an opportunity as well for you to connect dots for the hiring.
Going back to the connecting the dots, going back to being able to speak to your experience, going back to not making it hard to get to know you, especially if you're making a transition or you're pivoting from one role to another. What's the why? Answer the question before they have a chance to ask it. Employers are looking for any reason to put you in the no pile, not because they're like, we don't want you, but because they have so many applicants. So, cover letter, Alexandra's a yes. I've been changed in the last 5 years to be a yes as well. Now, also make it a good cover letter. Like Alexandra said, target your materials. It takes a long time to write a good cover letter. So if you're going to do it well, do it well. Alexandra, we are at time. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you. Thank you for your time and all the great work you're doing. Everyone else, thank you for joining us today. And next week, we have another recruiter, my friend Scott. We're going to talk about all things recruiting and why a lot of candidates hate recruiters. So he's going to try to bring you to his side about why you shouldn't. And you know what? Alexandra did that today. She brought a lot of humanity to the whole thing. But anyway, thank you for joining. Thank you, Alexandra. I will see everyone else next week for another episode of If I Don't Tell You, Who Will? Bye, everyone.